In 1919, at Florence's Café Cassoni, a bartender swapped soda for gin at the request of a daring count. That quiet moment in a corner cafe produced one of the most enduring aperitivi in history. What began as a simple favor has since become a story that stretches across continents and generations. But the Negroni's path wasn't always smooth. Its mix of gin, Campari, and vermouth survived world wars and shifting trends, enduring even the mid-century wave of sweet, tropical drinks that nearly swept bitter classics off the menu. Somehow, this understated blend held on, quietly waiting for its next chapter. Count Camillo Negroni was not one for half measures, at least, not when it came to his evening ritual. Picture Florence in 1919, a city humming with artists and aristocrats, where the air outside Café Cassoni was thick with the scent of espresso and the low murmur of conversation. Count Negroni, a well-traveled figure who'd spent time in North America and developed a taste for robust flavors in American-style bars, would settle in after a day that likely involved more than a few stories worth telling. His usual order was the Americano, a mix of soda water, sweet vermouth, and Campari. It was light, crisp, and exactly what most people wanted to ease into the evening. But the Count? He wanted something with more presence. Maybe it was confidence, maybe stubbornness, but he was about to change more than just his own night. On one of those evenings, Negroni looked across the bar at Fosco Scarselli and asked for a stronger version of his favorite drink. This wasn't a small tweak. Changing an aperitivo was almost unthinkable, especially in a city where tradition ran deep. Still, Scarselli obliged. He swapped the soda water for gin, a choice that transformed the drink's entire structure. And instead of the Americano's usual lemon peel, he reached for a slice of orange. That single swap wasn't just about flavor, it was a quiet signal to anyone watching that this was something new. The glass slid across the counter, orange shining against the red liquid, and a new chapter began. The first sip would have been unmistakable. Gone was the gentle fizz, replaced by the sharp clarity of gin. Sweet vermouth and bitter Campari met the gin's botanicals head-on, and suddenly the drink wasn't just refreshing, it was assertive. The Negroni didn't ask for your attention, it demanded it. The orange garnish, brighter and sweeter than lemon, told your senses that something had shifted before you even tasted it. That was the genius of Scarselli's move, a simple visual cue, rooted in tradition but signaling a break from it. Word spread quickly. Patrons started asking for the Count's drink, and before long, the Negroni had a name. In a city where most cocktails were named for their ingredients or their purpose, this one bore the Count's own. It was a small rebellion, a drink that stood out in a sea of gentle aperitivi. The Americano's lightness had given way to gin's strength, creating a contrast that people noticed. The Negroni didn't just get you ready for dinner, it woke you up. This wasn't just a story about swapping one spirit for another. The Negroni's creation marked a shift in drinking culture itself. In Florence, the aperitivo wasn't only about what you drank, but who you were while drinking it. For Count Negroni, who had moved through the smoky bars of America and returned home with a taste for something bolder, his order became an extension of his identity. The drink was unapologetically bitter, boozy, and balanced, qualities that mirrored the man behind its name. The mechanics inside the glass were deceptively simple. Where soda water in the Americano softened everything, gin brought higher alcohol and a punch of botanicals. Campari's bitterness, sweet vermouth's warmth, and gin's crisp notes all played off each other in a way that was both direct and unexpected. Each ingredient stood its ground, but together, they made something new, something that people in Florence hadn't tasted before. The orange garnish completed the experience, changing the drink's aroma and giving it a subtle sweetness right at the rim. If you were sitting at Café Cassoni back then, you might have noticed how this new drink changed the mood. Suddenly, the ritual of the aperitivo wasn't just about easing into the night, it was about making a statement. The Negroni invited you to join in, to try something a little more daring. And as more people ordered it, the drink began to take on a life of its own, moving from a bartender's experiment to a local favorite. There's something almost accidental about how it all happened. One request, one swap, and a garnish that signaled a break from tradition. The Negroni was born not from careful planning but from instinct and a willingness to try something different. Some might call it luck, others might say it was inevitable, a city like Florence, a count with a taste for boldness, and a bartender willing to listen. But even as the Negroni found its footing in Florence, no one could have predicted just how far it would go. For now, it was a drink for those who wanted more from their aperitivo, a quiet challenge to the old ways. The story was only beginning, and the Negroni's endurance would soon be tested by changing times and shifting palates. What is it about this trio, gin, Campari, and vermouth, that gives the Negroni its staying power? Why does a drink so simple feel so complete? The answer lies in the perfect balance these three ingredients create, a balance that would become the secret to the Negroni's lasting appeal. Picture a ruby-red liquid glistening on the ice, the glass catching the fading afternoon light. You lift it, and before you even taste it, the aroma is already working, bitter orange, sweet herbs, something sharp and clean underneath it all. That's the Negroni, 3 equal parts, each one pulling its weight, each one impossible to ignore. 1 part gin, 1 part Campari, 1 part sweet vermouth. Simple on paper, but what's in the glass is anything but simple. Campari leads the charge. It's bitter, yes, but not just in a one-note way. There's orange peel, rhubarb, and a medicinal tinge that lets you know you're not drinking something meant to disappear quietly. It's bold, and it sets the tone for what comes next. Sweet vermouth steps in, not to erase that bitterness, but to cushion it. You get notes of dried fruit, honey, and spice, a kind of gentle warmth that softens the edges without making things too easy. Then there's gin, the backbone of the drink. It's herbal, juniper bite slices through the sweetness and bitterness, tying everything together and leaving a crisp, dry finish. The flavors don't blur, they layer, and each sip is a little different from the last. If you pay attention, the Negroni isn't just a drink you taste. It's a drink you feel. That first sip is a burst of bitterness, then a slow wave of sweetness, and finally a clean, bracing note that lingers just long enough to make you want another. There are no tricks, no fancy infusions or complicated steps. It's 3 bottles, a glass, some ice, and a slice of orange. Yet somehow, it's never boring. The longer you sit with it, the more you notice, the way the flavors shift as the ice melts, the way the orange oils hover above the surface, the way the drink seems to change with your mood or the time of day. It follows classic cocktail principles: bitterness from Campari, sweetness from vermouth, strength and aromatics from gin. Yet yields something more than the sum of its parts. The structure is so tight that nothing feels out of place. Bartenders love it because you can tweak the ratios, swap out brands, or even substitute one ingredient, and you still end up with something that feels unmistakably Negroni. That's why it's become a kind of shorthand for balance in the cocktail world. You could say it's the cocktail equivalent of a three-legged stool: take away any part, and the whole thing collapses. This balance is what gives the Negroni its staying power. It's not just that the ingredients work together, it's that they push against each other. The drink is bitter, but never harsh. Sweet, but never syrupy. Strong, but never overwhelming. Every element is present, but none dominate. It's the rare drink that can appeal to both seasoned bartenders and casual drinkers, and it's comfortable in almost any setting. You could be perched on a bar stool in Florence, or standing in your own kitchen with a handful of ice and whatever bottles you have on hand. The Negroni doesn't care about perfection. It just asks you to pay attention. You'll hear people talk about its adaptability, and for good reason. The basic template invites experimentation: swap gin for whiskey, and you get the Boulevardier, a drink with the same bones but a richer, earthier profile. Use sparkling wine instead of gin, and there's the Negroni Sbagliato, lighter and more effervescent. Even the white Negroni, with its pale, floral notes, owes everything to the original's blueprint. Each variation bends the rules but never breaks them. If you're curious about these riffs, don't worry, we'll get deeper into them later. What's remarkable is how universal the Negroni feels. It's an aperitivo, sure, something to wake up your palate before dinner. But it's also a nightcap, or a drink to nurse over a quiet conversation. It doesn't demand ceremony or special glassware. You can make it with whatever gin or vermouth you have, and as long as the balance is there, it works. That's probably why you see it everywhere, from sidewalk cafes in Milan to dimly lit bars in New York. It adapts to the moment, without ever losing its core identity. The Negroni also stands out because it gives every ingredient a voice. There's no filler, no supporting act. Gin, Campari, and vermouth are all front and center, each one distinct but working in concert. It's a rare thing in cocktails. Usually, one ingredient leads and the others follow. Here, they all share the spotlight. Orson Welles, after trying his first Negroni in 1947, famously said, "The bitters are excellent for your liver, the gin is bad for you." They balance each other. That's the Negroni in a nutshell: contradiction, harmony, and a little bit of wit. Bartenders have a soft spot for it because it's both easy and challenging. The recipe couldn't be simpler, but getting the balance right takes a little care. The choice of gin, the style of vermouth, even the size of the orange twist, all of it matters. But the drink is forgiving, too. If your ice melts a little faster, or you pour with a heavier hand, the Negroni still delivers. It's the kind of cocktail you can return to again and again, always finding something new in its simplicity. That might be why the Negroni never feels dated. Even as tastes change and new trends come and go, it remains relevant. Other classic cocktails get tied to a specific era, but the Negroni floats above all that. It's been bitter and bold since the beginning, and somehow, that's always felt a little modern. Maybe it's the adaptability, or maybe it's just that the drink refuses to compromise. All of this, the balance, the simplicity, the adaptability, explains why the Negroni became a foundation for creativity in bars around the world. Its structure is sound enough to support endless variations, but its heart never changes. You can remix it, reinterpret it, or strip it down to the basics, and it still feels like a Negroni. That's a rare thing in the world of cocktails. Of course, even the strongest foundation can be shaken. There was a time when the Negroni's bold, bitter profile wasn't what people wanted. Tastes shifted, and for a while, the drink nearly vanished from bars and menus. But the Negroni never disappeared completely, it just waited, quietly, for the world to come back around. So, how does a drink built on balance and backbone end up nearly fading from view? To see where things went sideways for the Negroni, you have to put yourself in the middle of the 20th century, a time when cocktails were getting a candy-coated makeover. Bars were ditching the crisp, bitter flavors of old for something much sweeter, much flashier. This was the era of tiki bars and syrupy concoctions like the piña colada, a drink introduced in the 1950s that was all coconut cream, pineapple juice, and rum. It was the polar opposite of the Negroni, soft, sweet, and designed to go down easy. Drinks came in tall, colorful mugs, sometimes topped with a tiny umbrella, and nobody was asking for a bracing dose of Campari. You walk into a bar in the 1960s. The soundtrack is bright, the lights are low, and everyone's holding something that looks more like dessert than a drink. The Mai Tai, the Blue Hawaii, the Harvey Wallbanger, these were the crowd pleasers, packed with sugar, fruit, and little else. Cocktails had become a party trick, less about savoring and more about escaping. The Negroni, with its unapologetic bitterness, was a hard sell. It didn't fit the mood, and it definitely didn't fit the glassware. There's a reason for this shift, and it's not just about flavor. After World War II, people wanted to forget hardship and lean into the fantasy of leisure. Tiki bars, like Trader Vic's and Don the Beachcomber, became the backdrop for this new kind of escapism. Drinks arrived with smoke, fire, or enough fruit to fill a salad bowl. The spectacle was the point. In that setting, the Negroni, quiet, ruby red, and served simply over ice, felt like a relic. But the Negroni's crisis wasn't just about being upstaged by pineapples and paper umbrellas. It was about a deeper cultural turn. Sweetness was comfort. Sweetness was easy. And anything that challenged your palate, anything that asked you to slow down and taste, was politely shown the door. The Negroni was still there, but it was out of step with the times. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. The Negroni didn't disappear. It just stopped being the center of attention, especially outside Italy. In Florence and Milan, the aperitivo culture kept it on menus, even as it faded from memory in bars elsewhere. Italians still gathered in the early evening, sharing small plates and sipping bitter drinks that woke up the appetite. The Negroni was never really gone in those places, it just wasn't making headlines. Outside of Italy, though, things looked bleak. The Negroni became a kind of secret handshake among bartenders and cocktail diehards. It was something you ordered if you wanted to signal that you knew your way around a bar. It was never the most popular choice, but it had a stubborn following, people who liked their drinks with a bit of bite. The Negroni's reputation was built on being different. It didn't need to be sweet or flashy. It just needed to be itself. Stories about the Negroni's fans sometimes take on a life of their own. Orson Welles famously tried the drink in 1947 and quipped, "The bitters are excellent for your liver, the gin is bad for you." They balance each other. This kind of offhand praise gave the Negroni a certain mystique. Rumors even circulate about Ernest Hemingway enjoying Negronis during his time abroad, though no solid evidence backs it up. Still, these anecdotes kept the drink's legend alive, even when it was rarely seen on menus. Meanwhile, the sugary wave rolled on. Through the 1970s and into the 80s, bars leaned hard into pre-batched mixers and one-note cocktails. The Negroni, with its precise balance and boldness, felt almost academic compared to a neon blue margarita. The world wanted easy, and the Negroni was anything but. Yet the drink's survival wasn't just luck. It was about character. The Negroni never tried to blend in. It stayed true to its roots, and that stubbornness helped it endure. In Italy, it remained a staple of the aperitivo hour. In other places, it became a quiet badge of honor among those who valued authenticity over trend. Even in its lowest moments, the Negroni wasn't forgotten. It was just waiting for a change in the wind. By the late 1990s, cracks started to show in the sugary facade. Bartenders who cared about craft began to look backward, searching for drinks with real structure and flavor. The Negroni's formula, equal parts gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth, was simple, but it offered a complexity that was missing from most contemporary cocktails. Suddenly, what once made the Negroni feel out of place became its greatest strength. The drink's endurance through this period wasn't guaranteed. If not for the loyalty of a handful of bartenders and drinkers. Especially in Florence and Milan, where the aperitivo tradition never really let go, it might have slipped away for good. But the Negroni's identity was too strong to erase. It was remembered, if not always poured, and that memory was enough to give it a fighting chance when the world started to crave something real again. So, when the tides finally turned and the cocktail world grew tired of syrup and spectacle, the Negroni was ready. It hadn't changed. It hadn't adapted to fit the times. It just waited for the times to change around it. And that's where the story picks up again, with a new generation of bartenders and drinkers looking for a drink that didn't hide behind sweetness or showmanship. The Negroni, balanced and bold as ever, was about to step back into the light. By the early 2000s, bars everywhere were waking up from decades of syrupy, neon-colored drinks. The Aplatinas and Cosmos of the 80s and 90s had finally lost their grip, and people were tired of pretending those drinks were anything more than sugar in a glass. There was a new appetite for something real, something that felt like it had history and backbone. Enter the craft cocktail movement, a slow, deliberate return to the basics. Bartenders started digging through old recipe books, learning to stir and shake with intent, and putting real effort into every pour. The focus wasn't on spectacle anymore. It was about taste, technique, and honoring the classics. In a world searching for authenticity, the Negroni fit right in. If you were working behind a bar in New York or London at the time, you could almost feel the shift. Suddenly, that dusty bottle of Campari on the back shelf was worth a second look. The Negroni's formula, 3 equal parts, nothing more, nothing less, became a kind of litmus test for bartenders. Could you balance those flavors just right? Could you make something that simple feel special? The answer was yes, and it didn't take long for the Negroni to show up on menus everywhere. Its vivid color alone was enough to catch your eye, but the taste was what kept people coming back. Take New York City as an example. The Pegu Club, led by Audrey Saunders, was at the heart of the craft cocktail revival. Saunders was known for her meticulous approach, every ingredient measured, every step deliberate. In that setting, the Negroni's equal parts recipe made it an ideal flagship drink. It was both a test of skill and a showcase for quality ingredients. Bartenders there treated the Negroni with respect, using top-tier gin, carefully chosen vermouth, and Campari that hadn't changed in decades. The result was a drink that felt timeless but also completely at home in a modern bar. Over in London, the story was much the same. Places like Milk and Honey and the American Bar at the Savoy started to bring back the old-school classics. The Negroni stood out, not because it was flashy, but because it was unapologetically bitter. In an era where drinkers were learning to appreciate challenging flavors again, ordering a Negroni was almost a rite of passage. It meant you were ready to move past the sweet stuff and try something with a little edge. For bartenders, it was a chance to experiment within strict boundaries, swapping gins, trying different vermouths, but always coming back to that core balance. The craft cocktail movement arrived right as social media started to shape how people experienced food and drink. Suddenly, a cocktail's appearance mattered almost as much as its taste. The Negroni's jewel-like hue made it a subtle star on social feeds, appearing in photos that felt both classic and current. You'd see the orange slice catching the light, the deep red liquid shining through the glass, and it all looked effortless. People weren't just drinking Negronis, they were sharing them, tagging them, and turning them into quiet symbols of taste. At the heart of this revival was a renewed respect for ingredients. The Negroni didn't leave room for shortcuts. Bartenders spent time sourcing the best sweet vermouth, tasting through bottles to find just the right herbal and fruity notes. Gin became more than just a default spirit. Each brand brought something different to the table, from punchy juniper to soft, floral botanicals. Campari, with its secret recipe and unmistakable bitterness, became an object of fascination. The drink was simple, but every part of it mattered. Many bartenders say the Negroni became their off-shift drink of choice. After hours of mixing complicated cocktails, they'd reach for something that was easy to make but never boring. Word of its appeal spread through the industry, from city to city, until it felt like every serious bar had a Negroni on the menu. That insider enthusiasm quickly spilled over to the public. Suddenly, the drink that had once been an oddity was everywhere. The resurgence of the Negroni also changed the way people thought about vermouth. For years, it had been dismissed as an afterthought, something you kept in the fridge for the odd Manhattan or martini. But the craft cocktail movement brought new attention to quality vermouths. Bottles like Carpano Antica Formula and Cocky Vermouth di Torino started showing up behind bars, each adding depth and character to the Negroni. Gin, too, entered a new golden age, with small distilleries popping up and experimenting with botanicals. The Negroni became a way to showcase these new spirits, each one putting its own spin on the classic. Campari, for its part, recognized the moment. In 2013, Campari partnered with Imbibe magazine to launch Negroni Week, a global celebration that invited bars to serve Negronis and donate a portion of the proceeds to charity. What started as a small campaign quickly grew into an annual event, with thousands of bars participating and drinkers around the world raising their glasses in a shared toast. Negroni Week didn't just celebrate the drink, it turned it into a cultural touchstone, a way for people to connect over something simple and enduring. By the 2010s, the Negroni had become almost unavoidable. It was on menus everywhere, from rooftop lounges to neighborhood taverns. It wasn't just a drink for seasoned cocktail lovers, it was something anyone could order and enjoy. The Negroni's appeal came from its adaptability. It could be dressed up with rare spirits or made simply at home with whatever you had on hand. The drink structure was strong enough to handle endless tweaks, but its essence never changed. The Negroni's return did more than just revive a forgotten cocktail. It changed the way people thought about what a drink could be. Its success reminded bartenders and drinkers that bitterness had a place at the table, inspiring a wave of Amaro-based cocktails and a renewed interest in Italian drinking traditions. It also proved that simplicity could be powerful. In an era of complicated infusions and ornate garnishes, the Negroni's three-ingredient formula stood out as a quiet act of confidence. And then came the variations. As the Negroni found its place in the spotlight, bartenders and home enthusiasts alike started to experiment. Some swapped gin for whiskey, others added sparkling wine, and a few even played with the vermouth or the bitters. Each new version paid homage to the original while exploring new territory. These riffs didn't dilute the Negroni's legacy, they expanded it, showing just how versatile a simple recipe could be. So, as the Negroni settled into its new role as a modern classic, it opened the door for a wave of creativity. The drink structure invited experimentation, and its history gave every variation a sense of purpose. If you've ever wondered how a single cocktail could inspire so many offshoots, you're not alone. The next part of the story is all about those bold experiments and happy accidents, the moments when a simple swap or a lucky mistake created something new, and the Negroni's many faces began to emerge. If you've ever looked at a cocktail menu and seen a whole list of drinks with Negroni in the name, you're not alone. The Negroni's ability to reinvent itself is one of the reasons it's lasted so long, and it all starts with a story that feels more like a happy accident than a calculated invention. Picture Milan in the 1970s, Bar Basso buzzing in the evening, and a bartender reaching for gin, only to grab Prosecco by mistake. There's a pause, a decision, and then sparkling wine goes in the glass instead of gin. The result? The Negroni Sbagliato. Sbagliato means mistaken in Italian, which is about as honest as a cocktail name gets. This wasn't a planned twist, it was pure serendipity. The Sbagliato is lighter, bubbly, and a little less intimidating than the original, but it still carries the same bittersweet backbone. That simple mistake turned out to be a gift, and the Sbagliato quickly became a favorite for anyone looking for a more approachable version of the classic. Once people realized the Negroni could survive a swap like that, it opened the door to all kinds of variations. Bartenders started asking, what if we changed just one thing? Some of these new versions became classics in their own right. Take the Boulevardier, for example. Instead of gin, it uses bourbon, which brings a deep, caramel warmth to the drink. The Boulevardier isn't just a Negroni with whiskey, it has its own story. It first appeared in Paris in the 1920s, named after a magazine for American expats, and its earliest written recipe, found in the 1929 French book, Thenin, called for a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts bourbon, 2 parts sweet vermouth, 1 part Campari. That's a little different from the Negroni's equal parts formula, but the idea is the same: strong, bitter, and sweet, all in balance. The Boulevardier feels like autumn in a glass, rich, smooth, and a little bit nostalgic. Then there's the white Negroni, which takes the drink in a completely different direction. Instead of Campari, you get Suzy, a French apéritif made from gentian root. Instead of sweet vermouth, there's Lillet Blanc, which adds floral and citrus notes. The white Negroni was first mixed by Wayne Collins in 2002 for a bar in southwest France, and it's become a modern classic. The drink is lighter, more herbal, and just as balanced as the original. If the regular Negroni is a bold red, the white Negroni is like a spring afternoon, bright, fresh, and a little mysterious. It's proof that you can change the ingredients and still keep the spirit of the drink alive. The secret to all these variations is the Negroni's structure. The equal parts formula isn't just easy to remember, it's incredibly flexible. Research shows that the first written version of this formula appeared as Campari mixed in a 1929 French cocktail book, showing that the Negroni's roots were already open to interpretation even then. Swap out the gin, the vermouth, or the bitter element, and you get a drink that's different but still unmistakably a Negroni. Not every cocktail can handle that much change, but the Negroni's simplicity makes it possible. Once bartenders saw what was possible, the floodgates opened. There's the Kingston Negroni, which uses Jamaican rum instead of gin, bringing a funky, tropical twist to the glass. The Oaxacan Negroni swaps in mezcal, adding smoke and earthiness. Each new version reflects the place and the people who created it. The Boulevardier feels distinctly American, with bourbon's signature sweetness. The Sbagliato, with its sparkling wine, is pure Italian celebration. The Oaxacan Negroni brings a taste of Mexico's rugged landscape. Every variation is like a little snapshot of a different culture, a different moment in time. If you're sitting at a bar, you might notice that Negroni variations often serve as a kind of bartender's playground. The drink structure is so sturdy that you can experiment without worrying about ruining it. Some places even build whole menus around Negroni riffs, letting you choose your own adventure: gin or whiskey, rum or mezcal, bitter or floral. You might find a version with aquavit, or one that uses Amaro instead of Campari. Each new take is a reminder that the Negroni isn't just a drink, it's a framework for creativity. But the variations aren't just about showing off. They also help the Negroni stay relevant. If you don't like gin, there's a version for you. If Campari is too bitter, try a white Negroni or a Sbagliato. The drink adapts to your taste without losing its core identity. It's a little like a classic film that's been remade for a new generation. Same story, new details, fresh appeal. The Negroni's ability to evolve is what keeps it from feeling stuck in the past. Some of the best variations happened by accident, like the Sbagliato. Others came from careful experimentation, like the white Negroni. But in every case, the drink's DNA is still there. That's not something you see with every classic cocktail. The martini has its twists, the Manhattan has its spin-offs, but the sheer variety of Negroni riffs is in a league of its own. The equal part structure gives bartenders permission to play, and the result is a family of drinks that all feel connected. Even with all these new faces, the original Negroni hasn't lost its place. If anything, the variations make you appreciate the simplicity of the first version even more. Every time you try a new riff, you're reminded of why the classic works so well: 3 ingredients, perfectly balanced, no filler. The variations don't compete with the original, they add to its story, each one a new chapter that makes the whole thing richer. So, if you're ever tempted to write off the Negroni as just another old-school cocktail, remember all the ways it's been reimagined. Each version is a small celebration of creativity and a nod to the drink's roots. Whether you're sipping a Sbagliato in Milan, a Boulevardier in Paris, or a white Negroni in London, you're part of a tradition that's always moving forward, never standing still. And while the Negroni's many faces keep it fresh behind the bar, its story doesn't end there. The drink's influence has reached far beyond cocktails and menus, showing up in places you might not expect. That's a story worth exploring on its own. If you ever wondered how a simple cocktail could become a kind of shorthand in movies, books, and even travel writing, the Negroni is a prime example. Its journey into popular culture didn't happen overnight. It started with small moments, a few well-placed words, and the right people noticing it at just the right time. Take Orson Welles, for instance. In 1947, while working in Rome on the film Cagliostro, he tried his first Negroni and later shared his thoughts in an interview with the Coshocton Tribune. His line, "The bitters are excellent for your liver, the gin is bad for you. They balance each other," captures both the drink's character and Welles' own sly humor. It's a quote that sticks, not just because it's clever, but because it matches the drink's reality: a little bit of good, a little bit of mischief, in perfect balance. Welles wasn't a bartender or a cocktail expert. He was a storyteller, and in that moment, he gave the Negroni its first real taste of cultural myth. That's how the Negroni started to move from being just a drink to something with a story. It became a symbol, a quiet nod to those who knew. If you were in the right bar, in the right city, and you ordered a Negroni, you were sending a message. Maybe you were in on the secret, maybe you just liked the taste, but either way, you weren't just following the crowd. You were making a small declaration of independence. The Negroni's appearances didn't stop with Welles. In the 1950s, the drink popped up in travel writing and novels, quietly signaling its growing presence beyond Italy. Horace Sutton's 1950 travelogue mentions the Negroni as a staple in Florence, a detail that paints a picture of the city's café culture and the drink's place in it. Rupert Croft Cook's 1956 book, Tangerine House, also references the Negroni, using it to set a scene and give a sense of time and place. These aren't flashy moments, but they're real, and they show how the cocktail began to weave itself into the fabric of modern life. When a writer describes a Negroni on a warm evening in Florence, you can almost feel the glass in your hand, the taste of bitters and orange, the slow pace of a day winding down. Film and television have picked up on that same energy. The Negroni doesn't need a starring role to make an impression. Sometimes it's just there, resting on a table, or in the hand of a character who seems a bit sharper than everyone else in the room. Its deep red color stands out, but it never shouts for attention. Directors and set designers know what they're doing. When a Negroni appears, it's usually on purpose, a visual cue that suggests a certain kind of taste or confidence. It's not about showing off. It's about quiet assurance. In modern times, the Negroni has found a new stage on social media. Instagram, in particular, has given the drink a kind of visual immortality. The Negroni's color, bright, unmistakable, almost glowing, makes it a favorite for photos. People post their Negronis on marble tables, at rooftop bars, or in the golden light of late afternoon. These aren't grand gestures. They're small cultural gestures, each one adding to the drink's quiet reputation. It's not about showing the world you're special. It's about enjoying something classic, something that's been around long enough to feel both familiar and a little bit mysterious. This isn't just about appearances, though. There's something in the psychology of seeing a drink show up again and again in books, films, and feeds. It builds an association. When you notice a Negroni in a novel or spot one in a travel essay, you start to connect the drink with a certain way of living, unhurried, thoughtful, maybe even a bit unconventional. It's a drink for people who don't mind a little bitterness, who are willing to try something that not everyone else is ordering. That sense of quiet distinction is part of what keeps the Negroni relevant, decade after decade. Writers, filmmakers, and bartenders have all played a part in this. Every time someone mentions the Negroni, whether it's a passing reference in a travelogue or a careful shot in a film, they're adding to the drink story. It's not a story that needs to be shouted. It's more like a thread that runs through different parts of culture, connecting people who might otherwise have nothing in common. If you've ever found yourself ordering a Negroni after reading about it or seeing it on screen, congratulations, you're part of that story now, too. The Negroni's place in popular culture is a little different from other cocktails. The martini might be forever tied to James Bond, and the old-fashioned might make you think of smoky back rooms and old-school bars. The Negroni, though, keeps its own pace. It shows up where you least expect it, always a little bit out of step with the trends, always just bitter enough to be interesting. That's part of its charm. It doesn't need to be the most popular drink in the room. It just needs to be there, waiting for someone to notice. It helps, too, that the Negroni isn't for everyone. That's not a mark against it. In fact, it's part of the appeal. If you like it, you feel like you're in on something. You don't have to say a word. The drink speaks for itself. That sense of belonging, of being part of a small but growing group of people who appreciate something a little offbeat, adds to the Negroni's mystique. It's niche and mainstream at the same time, a rare trick that few cocktails can pull off. Through all these cultural appearances, the Negroni has managed to hold on to its identity. It's still the same drink that started in Florence over a century ago, but now it carries a little more weight. Each mention, each photograph, each quiet nod in a novel or film adds another layer to its story. The Negroni has become more than a cocktail. It's become a marker. A way to say something about yourself without saying anything at all. If you've ever wondered why a drink like the Negroni endures, even as trends and tastes change, this is part of the answer. Its place in popular culture keeps it alive, passing quietly from one generation to the next. These cultural touches have not only kept the Negroni relevant, they've helped set the stage for something even bigger, its spread from Florence to the rest of the world, and its transformation into a truly global icon. You can walk into a bar almost anywhere now, whether it's in Florence, Manhattan, or a quiet corner of Tokyo, and if you ask for a Negroni, the bartender will likely nod in recognition. That kind of reach isn't something you get by accident. The Negroni's path from a local favorite to a global staple is a story of slow persistence, shaped by travel, tradition, and a bit of luck. It started, as most good stories do, with a single person and a bit of curiosity. Count Camillo Negroni, who spent time in Manhattan from 1898 to 1904, picked up a taste for American cocktails during the golden age of bartending. When he returned to Florence, he brought not just memories, but a sense of what a good drink could be. That experience colored his request at Café Cassoni in 1919, when he asked for something stronger than his usual Americano. The result was a drink that felt both Italian and international, bitter, balanced, and just a little bit brash. For years, the Negroni was mostly an Italian thing. It fit perfectly into the country's aperitivo culture, a pre-dinner ritual that's as much about pausing the day as it is about the drink itself. Florence, with its art-filled streets and easy rhythm, was the Negroni's home base. But Italians are travelers, and as they moved, worked, and opened bars in other countries, the Negroni started to show up in new places. It was never a tidal wave. More like a slow seep, first in Milan and Rome, then in Paris, London, and eventually New York. Even as espresso and Italian wine found eager fans abroad, the Negroni didn't catch on right away. Its flavors, bitter, herbal, and a little sweet, weren't the easy sell that you'd find with a glass of Chianti or a frothy cappuccino. For a long time, the Negroni was something you discovered, not something that found you. In the 1960s, if you walked into a New York bar, you'd be more likely to get a tiki drink or a whiskey sour than a Negroni. The cocktail world was leaning sweet, bright, and easy. The Negroni, with its unapologetic bitterness, stayed on the fringes. A turning point came in the early 1960s, when the International Bartenders Association, IBA, included the Negroni in its first official cocktail book. This was more than just a nod to tradition, it was a sign that the drink had earned a place in the global canon. Still, it didn't spark a revolution. The Negroni grew quietly, passed between bartenders and travelers who appreciated its balance and simplicity. It became a bartender's handshake, a way to signal that you cared about the craft. Of course, the world of cocktails is fickle. Through the 1970s and 1980s, sugary drinks and wild colors dominated menus. If you wanted a Negroni, you had to know where to look. It wasn't the drink of the moment. It was a relic, something for people who liked their drinks with a little edge. But the Negroni never disappeared. It just waited. Then came the craft cocktail revival. Suddenly, bartenders wanted to make drinks with real history and structure. The Negroni's three-ingredient formula was a breath of fresh air. It was easy to make, hard to perfect, and open to endless variation. Bars in New York, London, and Sydney started putting Negronis on their menus, not as a novelty, but as a sign that they took their drink seriously. The Negroni became a conversation starter. "Have you tried a Negroni?" became a way to test someone's palate, to see if they were open to something a little bit different. The rise of the Negroni wasn't just about the drink itself. It was about what it represented. Here was a cocktail that didn't compromise. It didn't get sweeter or lighter to please the masses. It stayed true to itself, bitter, balanced, and bold. That kind of confidence has a way of catching on. People started to appreciate that a drink could be both simple and complex, that you didn't need a dozen ingredients to make something memorable. Industry recognition followed. The Negroni became one of the world's 10 most ordered cocktails, according to the annual Drinks International survey. That's not just a number, it's a sign that the drink has moved beyond a niche crowd and found a wider audience. Bartenders around the world report that the Negroni is one of their most requested drinks, right up there with classics like the margarita and the mojito. It's no longer a secret handshake. It's part of the standard repertoire. One reason for this success is the drink's adaptability. The Negroni's equal part structure makes it easy to experiment. Bartenders have created countless variations, some swapping gin for whiskey, others adding sparkling wine or changing the vermouth. Each new riff brings in new fans, but the core remains the same. That flexibility has helped the Negroni stay fresh, even as tastes and trends shift. But global reach isn't just about what happens in bars. It's about how people connect with the drink outside of them. In 2013, Campari and Imbibe magazine launched Negroni Week, a worldwide event where bars serve Negronis and donate a portion of the proceeds to charity. What started as a small campaign quickly became a fixture in cities across the globe. Negroni Week isn't just about selling drinks, it's about building community. Each year, thousands of bars participate, and the event has raised millions for charitable causes. That kind of engagement shows that the Negroni is more than a trend, it's something people want to be part of. Younger drinkers have also played a role in the Negroni's rise. There's something about the drink's bold color and reputation for being a little challenging that appeals to people looking for authenticity. The Negroni looks good in a photo, sure, but it also feels like a statement, a way to show you're not afraid of a little bitterness. It's become a staple not just in bars, but at home, where people experiment with their own versions or share their favorites online. Despite all this, the Negroni hasn't lost its identity. It's still the same drink that Count Negroni ordered more than a century ago. The ingredients haven't changed. The ritual, stirred over ice, garnished with orange, remains the same whether you're in a cafe in Florence or your own kitchen. That consistency is part of its appeal. The Negroni doesn't try to be everything to everyone. It just does what it does, and it does it well. So, if you find yourself in a bar far from Florence, and you see that familiar red drink on the menu, you're not just ordering a cocktail. You're taking part in a story that stretches across continents and generations. Each glass is a small act of connection, between places, between people, between past and present. That's the real reach of the Negroni. It's not just about geography or popularity. It's about the way a simple idea, done well, can find its place in the world. And as you take that first sip, you're reminded that some stories are worth repeating. From that first quiet order at Cafe Cassoni to bars around the world, the Negroni has always been more than just a cocktail. It's a story of balance, resilience, and quiet creativity, never rushing, never shouting, always holding its ground. Each glass reflects a century of small changes and steady tradition, adapting but never losing its core. If you've ever tried a Negroni or one of its variations, let us know your favorite in the comments. Or maybe you have another classic you think deserves the spotlight. Take a moment to savor something classic tonight, just as the Negroni has done for over a century.